show you in comparison. Look at Mount St. Helens and that little dot right there. And Mount St. Helens was a pretty big explosion. I was in Mount St. Helens back in 2011. Was it 2011? No, it was before that. It was a few years before that. It was 2008, because I used to live in the Northwest, and I used to go mountain biking all the time, and I went out in Mount St. Helens, and where the volcano, it was interesting because on one side of the mountain, it was just completely obliterated. And then the other side, you've got all these beautiful trees that didn't get affected as much, or at all, I shouldn't say at all, but didn't get affected. They look great. They're beautiful by the magma and lava that was released. That was a pretty big deal. And it could go off again because it's an active volcano. But look at the small plume in comparison to what would happen if Yellowstone was to erupt. So when you've got stories coming out and whistleblowers saying that the powers that be, those shadow agencies, are planning on detonating an explosion around the region where there's mass amounts of lava, the caldera there, it really makes you wonder. Now let's take a look at this right here. So first of all, this is what I find interesting. This is directly from usgs.gov. From 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes typically occur each year within Yellowstone National Park. So we've already exceeded the 1,000 quakes in just a couple of weeks, a little over a couple of weeks. Now, if we scroll up here, this will give you an idea. Recent seismic activity in the Yellowstone region over the past couple million years. And you see these outlines here. So look at the boundaries of the older calderas. And there's been articles that have come out recently that say there's more lava under there than originally thought. A lot more. And then you go here. Let's take a look at this right here. This will show you. Let me zoom in on this a little bit. You look at some prehistoric eruptions. A couple million years ago, about a million years ago, compared to what's happened here in the 20th century, the 19th century. And this is also interesting because it's very minute in comparison. So we haven't really seen obliteration like the ancients did yet. Here's another one right here. This is the volume of erupted volcanic ash. So you can look at Yellowstone here, 585 miles to the third power, 2.1 million years ago. Long Valley, Mount St. Helens, 0.1 versus 585. Look at that, 0.1 versus 585. To put that in comparison, Mount St. Helens versus Yellowstone. This is directly from volcanoes.usgs.gov. You can see that over the past 30 days, 1,114 earthquakes. 1,114 earthquakes in 30 days. So it's literally exceeded the yearly average in just a matter of a few weeks. And there's absolutely nothing to worry about according to the mainstream news. Now, when the mainstream news says there's nothing to worry about, that's when I think you need to worry about it. When they say there's something to worry about, it's usually there's not. Now, not always, but it seems like they just like to play these little mind games with us.
You're like, oh, watch these little cockroaches squirm. We're the elites. They're just the cockroaches.
No, it's the other way around. Right here, earthquakes from 1,000 to 3,000 earthquakes typically occur each year within Yellowstone National Park and its immediate surroundings. So, you go up here, you can look at the data once again. This is directly from usgs.gov. This is from truthernews.files. This is where I found this article where supposedly a whistleblower came out and said the powers that be are planning to ignite Yellowstone with a nuclear-type weapon. And this will show you that it's supposed to happen August 21st, 2021. You can see the amount of ash in feet according to these docs right here. This is a lot more than the other docs that I was sharing with you guys. I mean, it's saying 6 to 10 feet. In places, panhandle around Texas, parts of Idaho, obviously Montana. Jeez. And it's saying 13 feet. So these are way off compared to the ones that I was sharing with you guys. I don't know where they got this data. 0 to 11 inches. As far down as San Antonio, all the way down to, looks like Corpus Christi almost, in Texas. That's the beach. Could you imagine if that much ash covered the planet or covered the country? That makes me think of the Deagle reports. You guys remember the Deagle reports that came out? That's a think tank, and they are an independent think tank, and they came out with some calculations about how many people are going to be in the U.S. in, I think it was like 2027. And they were calculating, what, 29 million, 27 million, something like that. Now, here's another thing I think about. If you guys look at the amount of magma and lava that flows underneath us, it puts the landmass, it's pale in comparison. And I wonder, with all these nuclear reactors, these 449 plus nuclear reactors, and there's about 100 in the U.S., well, let's just say that all of a sudden this huge split opens up in the earth and it just sucks down, literally it just like eats those nuclear reactors. Then what happens? Then is that better than all of the nuclear stuff going out into the atmosphere? It gets swallowed up by the earth? Deagle's a great site, and they actually did a rebuttal, or they had not a rebuttal, but they talked about that report because it caused a whole bunch of chatter, and some people speculated it was from the Ebola virus, and they didn't even use those calculations. And we're getting some serious issues here with the internet stream, guys. So thank you for bearing with me here. I'll make sure to upload this as well because I am recording this. You guys won't have to deal with the internet issues, the internet gremlins. So stay with me, folks. Looks like it's stream complete. No, we're still streaming. This is bizarre. It's funny how everything's fine when I'm on the road. Then I get back and I start doing these shows and immediately start having internet issues. Almost every single time. It doesn't fail. I need my own internet service because this is ridiculous. So, 6 to 10 feet of ash, you guys, as far down as Arizona, like almost to the border of Mexico. This could take out literally almost the entire country if these reports are accurate. Now, what could you do? Well, you could go underground for a couple years, several months, and then come back out, have, I guess, I don't know, I'm speculating here, don't take my word for it, have respiratory gear, masks, everything you need to deal with that kind of stuff. You could have a concrete shelter somewhere and hopefully survive the initial onslaught and then come out, and then you'd have to find a way to, you'd have to have seeds, you'd have to have a water supply, you'd have to have a continual water source, filtration systems. Now, it's going to be tough to have solar power, I'll bet you. I don't know what solar power is going to be like. I mean, imagine what the sun's going to be like at that point. So you're going to have to find a way to create your own light source for a while, possibly. Maybe some type of fiber optic setup. Maybe you're going to need to have a place to where you can grow your own food inside. you know, some greenhouses, and then think about how much ash is going to land on the greenhouses. I mean, many of those would be destroyed. So you'd have to have some pretty solid facilities to withstand this. Now, if you're on the other side of the world, if you're in Canada, even Canada gets nailed. Look at this. Canada goes, looks like ash goes, you got 6 to 10 feet of ash going all the way into Canada, eh? In Minnesota. I mean, this is just complete devastation for the North American continent. I mean, this is way beyond anything that it showed on reports before that I was sharing with you guys. But you know what? I don't have the data on this. I mean, this could be easily just somebody's doom-poon fantasy. Somebody could have just, oh, you know, I think there's going to be 45 feet of ash because, you know, it just looks like it, and that's what I'm going to write down. So how do we know that this, I mean, or this could be a fear porn tactic by the powers that be. Say, oh, yeah, let's make everybody think that the entire U.S. is going to get wiped out with a supervolcano. They're really good at manipulating things. And they're also really good at telling people about things that are going to happen before they do in cartoons. Literally, I was watching Family Guy for a few minutes the other day when I was on the road. I usually don't watch that show. But Family Guy, it's creepy when you think about the predictive programming in Family Guy and The Simpsons, these cartoons. It is literally creepy. Because they tell you in cartoons sometimes about what's going to happen. Or maybe it's just the psychic intellect of these writers. You know, they're like, oh yeah, you know, they're just seeing it happen. It could be. It could be a combination of both. But isn't it bizarre how many things that have happened in real life, or at least it's portrayed in real life in the media, after it happens on The Simpsons or The Family Guy? And there's been a ton of stuff lately about Yellowstone and about these earthquakes around there. And maybe they're just trying to keep us freaked out so that they know how easy you are to control when you're in that fear state. It's a fight or flight mode, more so, than creative mode. Or maybe they're like, oh, we told you. You didn't do anything about it. And I also find it interesting that weird synchronicity, how I recently went out to New Mexico and explored all the volcanoes out there, and it just kind of happened. And then I had an opportunity to see how intense volcanoes really are. I mean, the aftermath. I remember for miles and miles and miles and miles driving in New Mexico and looking at the volcanic rocks on each side of me. And it looked like, a lot of them looked like they had just came up. You know, I mean, I was like, man, is there something going on under there right now? And I talked to the people at the Fire and Ice facility. It's a private land, but it's great. You guys should go check it out. It's about 4,000 acres. There's 29 volcanoes out there. 29 volcanoes. And I said, well, it looked like a lot of that volcanic rock was fresh. It looked like it had just popped up from the ground. And do you know anything about that? And the one guy said, no, I don't know anything about it. But then the other gal said, yeah, it's about 2 inches a year on average. New, you know, like from coming from the ground, lifting up. And then you go back, and it's also bizarre. Here's another synchronicity I want to get your opinions on. When I really started researching the patents and getting deep into the technical data on the chemical trails and the stratospheric aerosol injections, I mean, I've known about them for years. I've known about them for over 10 years, but I really started reading the patents and the white papers and the docs several months ago and sharing that information with you guys. And I remember reading an article popped up that talked about how back in the biblical days, around 5,000 years ago, approximately, I can't remember the exact dates, but it was a long time ago in the BC time frame, the atmosphere changed, the environment changed because there was several volcanoes, and the volcanoes changed the weather. And that's exactly what these stratospheric aerosol injections are doing. And then Zecharia Sitchin, you know what, you guys, for those of you that give Zecharia Sitchin a hard time, I started listening to the 12th Planet last night. That dude was brilliant. That dude was absolutely brilliant. And a lot of stuff, I haven't read all of his books or heard all of his stuff yet, but a lot of stuff that I listened to in that audiobook was correlating with what these Sumerian tablets via Oxford scholars have said. So you guys can love him or hate him, but I'll tell you, I got a lot more respect for that guy now, especially after listening to a lot of that book last night. And he was very, very intelligent. I also talked to somebody off the books about how he saw Sitchin live, and the guy talked for 3 hours straight on his chair, didn't pause, didn't stop, just dialed in. There's been plenty of people that have translated Sumerian cuneiform tablets that have came to very similar conclusions as Sitchin, except for Nibiru. Now, with that said, I think that this TRAPPIST-1 system that I shared with you guys might actually be where these Sumerians, or these Anunnaki that the Sumerians talked about, come from. But that's a whole other podcast. I'm just connecting the dots here on the volcanoes and how Sitchin said that the Anunnaki were attempting to ignite, were igniting nukes in calderas to cause volcanoes, to change the atmosphere. That didn't work. So then they started terraforming the atmosphere. Well, look at what we're doing, guys. We're terraforming the atmosphere. Now let's go back to the film Star Trek. The first blockbuster of the new series that came out. Thought it was brilliant, by the way. It was either the first or second one. And do you remember it starts off and they're on the planet Nibiru? They're on the planet Nibiru. And guess what? This is where the psyop is. The planet Nibiru, do you remember they were attempting to stop a volcano on Nibiru, Spock was. Because if that volcano would have erupted, it would have blown up the planet. It would have destroyed the planet. So Spock was willing to sacrifice himself to stop the volcano. Live long and prosper, Spock. Love you, man. You're awesome. He stops the volcano. And then remember Kirk. Kirk's awesome in the film also. Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk. The new series is great. They're running. Okay, so they're running and they're getting shot at with arrows and stuff by these tribal people on Nibiru. They get in the ship, they get away, and then all of a sudden the tribal people on Nibiru, they think that's their new god. They see the ship, they draw the ship on the ground, they start worshiping it, that's their new god. Well, guess what? I think Nibiru, what if Nibiru, I'm thinking of it the opposite. Nibiru, the people that were there, were not primitive like that. They were very intelligent, like the Sumerians talk about. And they also had their issues as well. They like to drink and they like to manipulate beings to do the work for them, and they like to go space travel. What's wrong with that? I'm joking, but that's the way they looked at it. What if Nibiru, obviously, in my opinion here, if the Sumerian archetype of the Anunnaki coming from Nibiru, you would think that the people on Nibiru would be extremely advanced. And it would be the opposite. It's like they're showing us what happened on Earth thousands of years ago when original Earthlings that had evolved in their own natural fashion that they weren't as, I don't want to use the term intellectual, because in some ways they were far above and beyond on a spiritual level and a soul level, but as far as the mental applications of building things to either blow stuff up or to, incredible, brilliant inventions, it's like you've got both there. They talked about, they would see something, they would see these beings come down from the skies and they would write about them, they would draw them, they would paint them, they would mimic them. So this is the kind of stuff that goes on in the media where they will throw it in your face, but they'll spin it a little bit. They'll tell you bits and pieces of truth, but they'll do the exact opposite on the reference of the specific person or archetype. They'll paint a picture of an archetype being good when maybe that archetype is bad. But they'll show you how the story unfolds on their side, their perception that they want you to look at, that they want you to absorb, that they want you to assimilate to. And they stopped that volcano from destroying the planet. Well, where did they get that information from? Did they steal it from the Sumerian stuff? They this is where they got it and they added it to the movies? Because we know that Hollywood is full of Department of Defense help. And you can read about this stuff. Let's say you're making a movie or a TV show and you need a bunch of submarines, or you need a couple of F-17s, or maybe you need a couple tanks or something. Well, the Department of Defense, they'll be more than happy to help you out, but you better add something to that script. You better paint the right picture that they want you to pitch their agenda. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's the way that it is. So if you're aware of that kind of stuff, then you can know how they're conditioning you. I mean, you watch some of these movies on terror where they paint the picture of these extremists, you know, being the bad guys, and they're going to come and, oh, that guy needs to be he needs to be waterboarded because he's an evil terrorist. But that's once again a whole other episode, but you get my point on the conditioning, how the powers that be will use certain archetypes and subliminal programming to get you to think your neighbor or that guy that lives around the world is the bad guy. And here's another thing that I find fascinating, you guys, is what is the next war going to be like? The next world war. There's been proxy wars going on now for a long time. But when you got global war going on, are all the players at the top levels working together to come to the same goal, except for maybe they've got their own agendas as well, but they have to follow certain rules and orders? Or will there be somebody that comes out of the woodwork that takes over a specific nation, whether it's a third world nation or, you know, something much more as far as industrialized? Will they just not follow the rules and just do whatever it takes? Because it seems like there's these hierarchical orders where even though there's weapons of mass destruction around the world, there's 449 nuclear reactors that we know about, there is a ton of doom and gloom. I mean, there's millions of fracking sites, yet we're still here. Some of us, thankfully, are still healthy. Some of us have the right ideas and mindset, even though all this nastiness is going on around us. But you can certainly see the polarities. But we're still here. And wouldn't you think that something would have happened previously? Or maybe something did happen, and that's why many are discussing the very real possibility we could be in some type of simulated matrix or reality right now. And I think to myself, well, would that explain why we see some days when we look up at the... For example, go back in your mind, folks, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you're taking a road trip. Let's say you're taking a road trip and you're going through Colorado, or you're going through Arizona, or you're going through Utah, or you're going through New Mexico, or you're going through Wyoming. Remember how you could see the horizon? Remember how you could actually see the mountains? Not just the outline, but you could actually see details of the mountains. Now, what's it like when you look out at the horizon? When you look out at these mountain ridges after mountain ridge after mountain ridge, what is it like? You can't even, it's like this weird haze. A lot of times, all you can see is the outlines of the mountains. Even if you're in an area where there's virtually no pollution, it's still there. Why? Well, back in 2011, when I took that 3,500-mile motorcycle trip in 7 days on my dual sport BMW, that was awesome, but it was also sore. I remember driving through the Canyonlands, driving through Arizona, this place called Canyon de Soleil, driving through New Mexico, and driving through, Wyoming on the way back. I drove all the way up, all through Utah, and I did this awesome round trip deal. I would stop at these parks like the Canyonlands, and it was so hazy and overcast and yucky. And I remember talking to these people there. I said, "You see that?" And they're like, "Yeah, what do you think it is?" I said, "That's from the chemtrails." And they said, "Yeah, well," and these were older people. And very nice, very down to earth. And they said they were talking to the people that worked at the park. And the people at the park were like, "Yeah, we've never seen anything like this either. This has got to be from all the wildfires." Yet, at that particular time, wildfires weren't in the area. They had nothing to do with it. It's the same thing now. It's the same thing it was last year. It's the same thing it was the year before that. When was the last time you actually saw a beautiful blue sky all the way to the end of the horizon? You can't even see the end of the horizon anymore. It's like this weird haze. I remember driving home yesterday and looking at the clouds. Do you remember when clouds used to like move? Like all the clouds, you would see clouds, they would actually move in a beautiful fashion. It's very rare that I see real clouds anymore, folks. When I say real clouds, I'm talking about clouds that were created by nature, not by stratospheric aerosol injections, by dumping chemicals into the atmosphere. I was looking at these streaks of these clouds. And you know what? They just sit there. They don't even move. They just sit there, stagnant. It's disgusting. And then I remember seeing above, I've got video footage of this. I'll share this video footage with you, of this planet. I'm 99.99999% certain it's the moon. I just have to punch in, because I've got about 3 minutes of video footage of this thing. I watched it for the whole way home. And the thing was this weird hazy thing, and it almost looked like the color of the clouds that they were spraying. And if you look at the moon, you could tell what the moon looks like in normal conditions. It's very easy to see the freaking moon. But now, because they spray so much crap into the atmosphere some days, you look at the moon and it doesn't even look like the moon anymore because it's all hazy and crap. I mean, it's just bizarre. I'll share this footage with you guys later. It's creepy. And I'm thinking to myself, imagine what happens if we get to a point where there's this huge planet that starts coming back. And we know, you guys, for a fact that there's dozens of trans-Neptunian objects, planets, potato, potato, same thing, that orbit our sun that will come back. Well, is this going to freak people out? I mean, if they see this huge planet in the atmosphere, are they going to start having like neurolinguistic programming breakdowns and not want to go to work and not want to do anything anymore because they just think the world's going to end? And they think that this giant planet that's coming back is actually going to rip up the, you know, it's going to cause these earthquakes and it's going to cause these volcanoes to erupt and it's going to cause the atmosphere to be destroyed. What do you think? What would you do if you saw huge planets in the atmosphere that you weren't used to seeing, based on all the doom that's been incorporated into the mindset for thousands of years? Whether you live or not, whether it destroys the planet or not, what would you do? What would your mindset do? So I'm thinking to myself, no wonder they're blasting the atmosphere if there's any way that the society is going to just collapse. People aren't going to go to work anymore because they're freaked out they're going to die, whether or not they are. What would you do if you were a government? Would you tell the people, or would you hide it from the people? I'd tell the people. I mean, if I was in control, I'd be like, here you go. What are you going to do about it? Then maybe, if everybody knows about it, they could come together and come up with solutions. But no, it's those parasitic, narcissistic a-holes at the top levels that feel they have to control everything because they feel like they're God's chosen, or they feel like they're gods, or they just don't care. Maybe they feel like they're the devil, whatever. They put some label on themselves to think that they're better than us, and they're going to come up with the solution. It's got to be their idea or no idea. They would rather see, some of these psychos would rather see the entire world destroyed if somebody else came up with the solution than themselves, because they're that narcissistic. Welcome to the new world order. Who controls the world? Who gets the most empires of dirt in this physical matrix, construct that we're in right now?
In Wyoming. The European Science Foundation has released a 70-page report called Extreme Geohazards, Reducing the Disaster Risk and Increasing Resilience. It references the Yellowstone supervolcano. Now, Yellowstone's volcano doesn't look like some others because it's a caldera, or a crater. It's around ground level instead of towering into the clouds. But scientists say it covers a really enormous reserve of magma beneath the Earth's surface. We have a rendering of what scientists say this underneath that volcano, an ocean of molten rock, they tell us, that stretches for hundreds of miles. Of course, nobody needs to freak out right now at all. Scientists say there's only about a 10% chance of an eruption like this happening anytime this century. So there's a good chance you'll never see it. But 10%, I mean, that's not tiny. And the U.S. Geological Survey noted last year, even if Yellowstone does erupt, it could be a small incident, not some Armageddon type thing. Michio Kaku joins us now. He's a theoretical physicist, a professor, a best-selling author, and friend of the program. Give us some context on this, what we're talking about here.
Well, forget the image of Yogi Bear representing Yellowstone. We're talking about a sleeping Godzilla underneath Yellowstone that, if it erupts in a maximum eruption called Category 8, it could literally tear the guts out of the United States of America. Instead of having 50 states of the Union, we would only have 30 states of the Union. Now that's Category 8. This report looked at Category 7, which is much more likely once every 1,000 years rather than once every million years. That means in every century, there's a 10% chance that somewhere on the planet Earth there could be a supervolcanic Category 7 eruption. That's the danger.
You just talked about a volcano that could wipe out 20 states. How in the world is that possible?
Well, it's happened before. 2.1 million years ago, 1.3, and also 0.6 million years ago. We have the evidence of a gigantic eruption that is sufficient to tear the guts out of the US of A. So this report has to be taken seriously, but hey, don't sell the store, don't panic. We don't expect it to happen in our lifetime.
It's hard really to imagine this lake of lava that stretches hundreds of miles in all directions. How do we know that, and how do they read that?
Well, just 2 years ago, there was a scare, in fact. We actually began to measure the size of this lava hotspot, and it turned out to be twice as big as we previously thought. However, the good news is that it's not migrating, it's not moving. We see no indication whatsoever that a big one is coming. However, eventually the law of averages catches up to you. And this report singled out Mount Vesuvius outside Naples, Italy, outside Mexico City, and Yellowstone as 3 hotspots where a Category 7 volcanic eruption could indeed take place in this century.
So there are only 3 of this size in all the world?
Well, there's several in Indonesia and New Zealand that have had Category 8 eruptions, in fact. But then again, we're talking about once every million years for Category 8. Category 7 will be many times the size of Mount St. Helens, enough to cause widespread destruction across the state, but not enough to destroy the US of A. But still something that we have to take very seriously now.
What would we get in the way of warnings, Michio?
Well, unlike a meteor from outer space, where you get no warning whatsoever, we get warnings. If you've seen movies like Pompeii, you know that there are days, in fact weeks, of eruptions building up, grumbling inside, underneath the ground, near the pocket of lava. So there would be enough time, several weeks, in order to begin evacuation if and when such an unlikely event were to take place.
All right, Michio Kaku on the news deck. No time to panic, but interesting, very interesting. Thank you.
Ground deformation is near the Norris Geyser Basin, the hottest and most unstable thermal basin in the park.
Norris Geyser Basin is one of the most dynamic of the hydrothermal areas at Yellowstone. It's always changing. We're always noticing new things that are happening.
Just a few years ago, satellite images showed Yellowstone's greatest rise in this area. Recently, however, it's reversed its direction and is now subsiding.
It's not actually within the Yellowstone caldera, yet it's one of the highest temperature thermal areas in the park. And it is possible that there is some magma extending to the north beneath that region.
The source of the basin's volatility could be magma, or another key component of volcanic activity, earthquakes.
The earthquakes are essentially the heartbeat of the system. They are an integral part of the active, if you wish, mountain building and volcanism of Yellowstone.
Like smoke and fire, volcanoes and earthquakes go hand in hand. The pressure from the magma, which can explode into a volcano, also forces the ground to shift, causing earthquakes. They can be the telltale signs of an impending eruption.
The 2 main precursors to a volcanic eruption, seismicity and ground deformation, are very carefully monitored in Yellowstone.
In this computer model, each red dot represents an earthquake. Typically, hundreds of earthquakes are detected across the park each year. In recent years, the greatest earthquake activity has been centered under 2 areas of the park.
Well, you can see we have earthquakes that are concentrated on the north side of Yellowstone, coming down through the park, and then out extending on the east side of the Teton Fault right here.
What concerns geologists is when a center of earthquake activity overlaps an area of shifting terrain. At the Norris Geyser Basin, that seems to be what's happening. There are dozens of fault lines at this spot.
That's very critical because if magma is starting to move up, we would expect to see a bulging in an area and associated earthquakes as the ground starts to crack.
The fear is faults that make up the earthquake zone could crack under pressure from the magma below, releasing an eruption. Geologists are also watching the park's geysers, hot springs, and mud pots, looking for drastic changes in temperatures and chemical content. Anything that might indicate a major movement of magma. At the moment, geologists do not believe an eruption is imminent. But if the water temperatures were to rise, the ground begin to swell, or there were an increase in earthquake activity, another Yellowstone eruption could be building.
I think that we are smart enough as geoscientists now that we would probably have weeks to perhaps months of indicators before anything like that would occur.
However, predicting the precise timing of an eruption is far from simple. Scientists have been fooled in the past.
We've seen it in Yellowstone. There's bulging, there's vibrations, there's increased seismicity. There's all the things one would expect and go, oh, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And then, nothing.
Supervolcanoes like Yellowstone could explode suddenly, without warning, without seismic movement signaled as earthquakes. When we think of an explosive volcanic eruption, we imagine it being preceded by earthquakes, by ground swelling, by the mountain venting some hot gas, perhaps even some lava. These are the signs we look for in the inexact science of volcanic predictions. But 2 research papers, published on the very same day this year, say that predicting supervolcano eruptions is even more difficult than predicting the eruptions of regular volcanoes. More on that in a moment, but first, do the events in Yellowstone earlier this year demonstrate changes that may be building toward an eruption?
We did have an earthquake of 4.8 magnitude. Now that is the largest we've had in Yellowstone in over 30 years.
And a couple of months later shuts down a road that's melted because of increased ground temperature. People start to get edgy about an impending eruption. I went to Yellowstone recently, and geothermal activity is everywhere. A reminder that you're on top of a super caldera and magma dome, the largest on Earth.
Frankly, we are just a few miles above some really hot magma. That magma serves as the heat that fuels the geysers and hot springs and fumaroles in the park. It's that engine that allows for the unique things that we see here in Yellowstone.
This is what the melted road looks like 2 months later. Yellowstone spokesman at the time said the road had turned to soup, and that was widely reported, even in the mainstream media. But when I spoke to a ranger there, she dismissed it as simply a bad asphalt job.
That was closed due to melting, the heat?
No, it has nothing to do with that. That was just a couple of days. It was the asphalt was soft. It was actually a bad asphalt job that they had done the summer previous to that.
Okay.
And that combined with the intensity of the sun in the middle of the summer, and that it was in a hydrothermal area, that it just got soft.
Oh, okay.
And they just had to replace it.
So it had nothing to do with an increase in geothermal activity in that area, the ground being hotter, it was just the asphalt wasn't?
The asphalt, yeah, it was the combination of those things in that particular spot.
I hadn't visited Firehole Lake Drive when I spoke to her, or I would have challenged what she told me. 2 months later, the road still doesn't look good. But more importantly, Yellowstone spokesman told the press at the time that people needed to stay away from the road because there was a high danger of stepping on seemingly solid soil into severely hot water. Contrary to what she said, Firehole Lake is an active geothermal area, and you can see that the road deteriorates as it comes into proximity to geothermal features. But it's what we've come to expect from government employees at every level: fear for their job if controversy erupts, and contempt for the public's right to know. If it was just a bad asphalt job heated up by the sun rather than increased ground temperature, then why are there other melted paved areas that they've just fenced off rather than try to fix? My suspicion is that the spots are so hot at the moment that they can't fix them. Ground temperature goes up and down with seismic activity in the park.
We see between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes a year in Yellowstone. Most of them are so small, nobody ever feels them.
Swarms of small earthquakes that you can't even feel can cause the ground to go through major changes. Look at this area that was once a forest. The ground was a hospitable environment for trees to grow for a long period of time. Then in 1978, swarms of small earthquakes caused the ground in this area to rise to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It wasn't the quakes, but the heat that killed the trees. So while we may be heading into another period of increased activity in Yellowstone, it's far from the largest activity we've seen since it became a park. Of course, everyone will tell you that it's not if, but when the supercaldera blows up.
Yellowstone's supervolcano has been hit by a series of earthquakes, with more 30 recorded since June 12. The latest was recorded on Monday, June 19, with a magnitude 3 earthquake striking 8.6 miles north-northeast of West Yellowstone, Montana. The swarm began last week, and on June 15 saw a magnitude 4.5 earthquake take place in Yellowstone National Park. The epicenter of the shock was located in Yellowstone National Park, 8 miles north-northeast of the town of West Yellowstone, Montana. Scientists from the University of Utah, which monitors Yellowstone volcano, said in a statement. The earthquake was reportedly felt in the towns of West Yellowstone and Gardner, Montana, in Yellowstone National Park, and elsewhere in the surrounding region. This earthquake was the largest to have hit Yellowstone since March 30, 2014, when a magnitude 4.8 earthquake was recorded 18 miles to the east, near the Norris-Giza Basin. The 4.5 earthquake is part of an energetic sequence of earthquakes in the same area that began on June 12, the statement continued. This sequence has included approximately 30 earthquakes of magnitude 2 and larger and 4 earthquakes of magnitude 3 and larger, including today's magnitude 4.5 event. As of June 16, 235 events had been recorded. Most of these ranged in the magnitude of 0 to 1, with 5 less than 0. The University of Utah is part of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, YVO, which monitors volcanic and earthquake activity in Yellowstone National Park. Seismic activity at volcanoes can signal an eruption is due to take place, although predicting exactly when a volcano will erupt is.
As you see, the calderas left by the magma plume at Yellowstone. So you can see that the Earth's crust has moved across this plume, and subsequent eruptions you can see moving further north as the crust moves in a different direction. The magma plume itself is not what anybody thought. Usually they don't tell us a whole lot about the magma plume, but it's not a ball of magma. And the magma plume is actually not traversing up vertically from depths. It is coming up at a lateral motion from Idaho, where it's deep, into Yellowstone, where it is getting very shallow. This is a diagram showing you where most of the earthquakes are occurring is in this blue zone, where the magma percolates and it starts to separate out and become superficial, closer to the surface, different compositions. But when magma filters through cracks and then percolates back down, it hardens and forms these dikes. These dikes compartmentalize the underneath ground into chambers. The dikes have a tendency to crack and break and fill empty chambers, thereby creating an overflow system for the park itself. And it's not unusual to have new substance come up and form different dikes for different substances of different temperatures and different liquidity. The rhyolite, like I say, this is a rhyolite slab. That is really the big question mark as to how it will behave under this type of structure. These are cracks. They go deep into the ground. They look like honeycomb from the air. Magma fills and seeps in, and then the compartmentalized magma will create a much smaller crater inside the caldera itself. And this is an example of what we're hoping, if there's an eruption, will happen. It'll be a small eruption from one of these chambers. Long Valley is a different story altogether. The central magma chamber is creating all the uplift in this area. It's a central resurgent dome. We don't want that to go. But this explains why Yellowstone is so well behaved. Notice though, the cylinder is a diagram showing what happens in the convection zone, where there's a lot of churning liquid magma, foaming magma, and water. You get a positive and a negative polarity between the colder and the hotter barriers and boundaries, and that's what gives rise to some of the electromagnetic events that you see surrounding volcanoes and even some seismic earthquakes that do occur in volcanic zones, because we know that seismic zones and volcanism go hand in hand. But this is a really nice structure, really, for you notice the rhyolitic magma on the top, and notice at the edges of the caldera is where we have our intrusions. This intrusion spreads out laterally and flattens out. It's not very deep at the 2 kilometer depth. It's rather shallow. That's the rhyolite keeping it down. Don't let ash fields discourage you here. Even in the 600,000 year ago eruption, the tectonic plates and the shifting of the crust has placed things in a completely different arrangement than they were back then. Even the jet stream has changed. So we're predicting a left to right or east to west.
Okay, there's a lot of seismometers placed all around the caldera, and they're just measuring devices. The geology of this area is pretty complex, but the thing to notice is there are some fault zones that go near the surface. This is the part that they're targeting. The thing is, with this huge amount of high-pressure magma, if there is ever a breakthrough to the surface, you're going to have a major eruption. And it is just a tiny, tiny crack in the rock, what they call a tornillo, where you have a magma intrusion and then a flow, and once that reaches the surface, basically it's unstoppable. So what kind of thing are they doing here? Here's the fault zone that's been under attack for 2 years. This is dang it, I forget the name of that. They made all 3 of these. They're attacking 3 sites, and they've got like Maple Lake, Mirror, I forget, darn it. Anyway, this is the equipment, or it's something similar to the equipment they're using. They have a computer-controlled array of this type of device. It's called a vibro-sized truck. This is a 60-ton truck that can press this steel plate down and produce actually earthquakes. And when they're arranged in an array, you have the ability to put these pressure waves into the earth, which I'll show in a minute. And yes, they're absolutely huge. They're used for natural gas exploration because you can actually map the underlying rock with these seismic waves. Here's a vibro-size waveform. Just a typical thump on the ground and the kind of thing that happens, and it looks like it's peaking about 10,000 pound force here. And here's one that's actually frequency swept. You want to remember, this is the kind of a waveform they can.
That no, it's happening every 100,000 or so. And satellites show us giant craters all over the world that have just been filled in with water or filled in with trees, filled in with foliage. I don't know all the mysteries of the universe, but I know this: the ring of fire from the Pacific Ocean all the way around from Asia to the tip of Chile has triggered everywhere in the last decade but key plates off California. Now, the sun's cooled off. That affects our climate. Is that doing it? Is it the magnetic field? He's the expert because he looks at all the studies, the full spectrum. So many experts at the university level just write their own little papers in their one little area and don't do the general research. He's with us for the rest of the hour, 5 minutes the next hour, standeo.com. And the last time he was on was over a year ago. Time flies, February 6, 2015. You can pull that interview up. You can hear it for yourself, but the body of his work's there, the books he's written. He has predicted things more accurately than anybody I have read or talked to. Here's the headline: Volcanic experts, super eruption coming. And now you see what they're calling unprecedented eruptions, unprecedented geological activity, tectonic activity. And going over his bio, he held an above top secret security clearance and worked undercover with the FBI. He was part of an exclusive black project specializing in the development of advanced technology. Stands diverse background encompasses computer programming, marine architecture, advanced propulsion engineering, biblical studies, and earthquake forecasting. And I'm not going to go over all the things that he's breaking down, but we're going to get into earthquakes with him right now. Pretty wild stuff. Stan Deyo, great to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me again, Alex. There's certainly a lot happening to talk about.
Well, everything you said over a year ago here, I thought it was 6 months ago, is basically now happening. Tell us what's happening from your research, what's coming next, because obviously the government and people are going to play this now.
Well, there are probably good reasons for that. Not that I side with the Illuminists. they have their own agenda, but the scientific community is hamstrung. And if they weren't, they have the fear of causing a panic if they predict an earthquake or a volcano and it doesn't happen. And so they're put in between a rock and a hard place to tell the public. And now then, of course, they've got a White House muzzle on them, so they can't say anything. I have gotten information out that is not mainstream or is not even on the internet from a couple of individuals who are involved inside USGS. And they have said that they've been making drivers, truck drivers, and technicians that are delivering stuff to USGS at Yellowstone, have been for the last 2 years, to not tell anybody about it, and the number of seismometers that they're putting in, and the fact that they're connected to a supercomputer. I think they've moved it from Texas now then to Utah, to the new center. But there's a lot of effort being pointed at Yellowstone, and you can see the evidence of it in a lot of the video coming out of there that they're allowing to come out. And also last month, toward the end of the month, they closed down the whole network of seismometers,
The other area of striking ground deformation is near the Norris Geyser Basin, the hottest and most unstable thermal basin in the park.
Norris Geyser Basin is one of the most dynamic of the hydrothermal areas at Yellowstone. It's always changing. We're always noticing new things that are happening.
Just a few years ago, satellite images showed Yellowstone's greatest rise in this area. Recently, however, it's reversed its direction and is now subsiding.
It's not actually within the Yellowstone caldera, yet it's one of the highest temperature thermal areas in the park. And it is possible that there is some magma extending to the north beneath that region.
The source of the basin's volatility could be magma, or another key component to volcanic activity, earthquakes.
The earthquakes are essentially the heartbeat of the system. They're an integral part of the active, if you wish, mountain building and volcanism of Yellowstone.
Like smoke and fire, volcanoes and earthquakes go hand in hand. The pressure from the magma, which can explode into a volcano, also forces the ground to shift, causing earthquakes. They can be the telltale signs of an impending eruption.
The two main precursors to a volcanic eruption, seismicity and ground deformation, are very carefully monitored in Yellowstone.
In this computer model, each red dot represents an earthquake. Typically, hundreds of earthquakes are detected across the park each year. In recent years, the greatest earthquake activity has been centered under two areas of the park.
Well, you can see we have earthquakes that are concentrated on the north side of Yellowstone, coming down through the park, and then out extending on the east side of the Teton Fault right here.
What concerns geologists is when a center of earthquake activity overlaps an area of shifting terrain. At the Norris Geyser Basin, that seems to be what's happening. There are dozens of fault lines at this spot.
That's very critical because if magma is starting to move up, we would expect to see a bulging in an area and associated earthquakes as the ground starts to crack.
The fear is faults that make up the earthquake zone could crack under pressure from the magma below, releasing an eruption. Geologists are also watching the park's geysers, hot springs, and mud pots, looking for drastic changes in temperatures and chemical content. Anything that might indicate a major movement of magma. At the moment, geologists do not believe an eruption is imminent. But if the water temperatures were to rise, the ground begin to swell, or there were an increase in earthquake activity, another Yellowstone eruption could be building.
I think that we are smart enough as geoscientists now that we would probably have weeks to perhaps months of indicators before anything like that would occur.
However, predicting the precise timing of an eruption is far from simple. Scientists have been fooled in the past.
We've seen it in Yellowstone. There's bulging, there's vibrations, there's increased seismicity. There's all the things one would expect and go, oh, uh-oh, we're in trouble. And then, nothing.
Supervolcanoes like Yellowstone could explode suddenly, without warning, without seismic movement signaled as earthquakes. When we think of an explosive volcanic eruption, we imagine it being preceded by earthquakes, by ground swelling, by the mountain venting some hot gas, perhaps even some lava. These are the signs we look for in the inexact science of volcanic predictions. But two research papers, published on the very same day this year, say that predicting supervolcano eruptions is even more difficult than predicting the eruptions of regular volcanoes. More on that in a moment, but first, do the events in Yellowstone earlier this year demonstrate changes that may be building toward an eruption?
We did have an earthquake of 4.8 magnitude. Now that is the largest we've had in Yellowstone in over 30 years.
And a couple of months later shuts down a road that's melted because of increased ground temperature. People start to get edgy about an impending eruption. I went to Yellowstone recently, and geothermal activity is everywhere. A reminder that you're on top of a super caldera and magma dome, the largest on Earth.
Frankly, we are just a few miles above some really hot magma. That magma serves as the heat that fuels the geysers and hot springs and fumaroles in the park. It's that engine that allows for the unique things that we see here in Yellowstone.
This is what the melted road looks like 2 months later. Yellowstone spokesman at the time said the road had turned to soup, and that was widely reported, even in the mainstream media. But when I spoke to a ranger there, she dismissed it as simply a bad asphalt job.
That was closed due to melting, the heat?
No, it has nothing to do with that. That was just a couple of days. It was the asphalt was soft. It was actually a bad asphalt job that they had done the summer previous to that.
Okay.
And that combined with the intensity of the sun in the middle of the summer, and that it was in a hydrothermal area, that it just got soft.
Oh, okay.
And they just had to replace it.
So it had nothing to do with an increase in geothermal activity in that area, the ground being hotter. It was just the asphalt, wasn't it?
The asphalt, yeah, it was the combination of those things in that particular spot.
I hadn't visited Firehole Lake Drive when I spoke to her, or I would have challenged what she told me. 2 months later, the road still doesn't look good. But more importantly, Yellowstone spokesman told the press at the time that people needed to stay away from the road because there was a high danger of stepping on seemingly solid soil into severely hot water. Contrary to what she said, Firehole Lake is an active geothermal area, and you can see that the road deteriorates as it comes into proximity to geothermal features. But it's what we've come to expect from government employees at every level: fear for their job if controversy erupts, and contempt for the public's right to know. If it was just a bad asphalt job heated up by the sun rather than increased ground temperature, then why are there other melted paved areas that they've just fenced off rather than try to fix? My suspicion is that the spots are so hot at the moment that they can't fix them. Ground temperature goes up and down with seismic activity in the park.
We see between 1,000 and 3,000 earthquakes a year in Yellowstone. Most of them are so small, nobody ever feels them.
Swarms of small earthquakes that you can't even feel can cause the ground to go through major changes. Look at this area that was once a forest. The ground was a hospitable environment for trees to grow for a long period of time. Then in 1978, swarms of small earthquakes caused the ground in this area to rise to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It wasn't the quakes, but the heat that killed the trees. So while we may be heading into another period of increased activity in Yellowstone, it's far from the largest activity we've seen since it became a park. Of course, everyone will tell you that it's not if, but when the super caldera blows up.
Yellowstone's supervolcano has been hit by a series of earthquakes, with more 30 recorded since June 12. The latest was recorded on Monday, June 19, with a magnitude 3 earthquake striking 8.6 miles north-northeast of West Yellowstone, Montana. The swarm began last week, and on June 15 saw a magnitude 4.5 earthquake take place in Yellowstone National Park. The epicenter of the shock was located in Yellowstone National Park, 8 miles north-northeast of the town of West Yellowstone, Montana. Scientists from the University of Utah, which monitors Yellowstone volcano, said in a statement. The earthquake was reportedly felt in the towns of West Yellowstone and Gardner, Montana, in Yellowstone National Park, and elsewhere in the surrounding region. This earthquake was the largest to have hit Yellowstone since March 30, 2014, when a magnitude 4.8 earthquake was recorded 18 miles to the east, near the Norris-Giza Basin. The 4.5 earthquake is part of an energetic sequence of earthquakes in the same area that began on June 12, the statement continued. This sequence has included approximately 30 earthquakes of magnitude 2 and larger and 4 earthquakes of magnitude 3 and larger, including today's magnitude 4.5 event. As of June 16, 235 events had been recorded. Most of these ranged in the magnitude of 0 to 1, with 5 less than 0. The University of Utah is part of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, YVO, which monitors volcanic and earthquake activity in Yellowstone National Park. Seismic activity at volcanoes can signal an eruption is due to take place, although predicting exactly when a volcano will erupt
Volcano is ready to blow. Scientists warn. Building to blow. This is the Long Valley caldera of California. It's not just Yellowstone that is ready to blow. We also have another old area, the Long Valley caldera, located in the area of California. It would take in California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Certainly hoping that all these states have evacuation plans, including filter masks to wear and emergency food and water. The way the Long Valley volcano is acting, you might need this as soon as possible. When people think of California, they may think of earthquakes, but a lot of people don't know that there are volcanoes there as well. At least two, the Lassen Peak and the much larger Long Valley caldera near Mammoth Lakes. In 1915, Lassen Peak erupted and wrecked a huge portion of the state of California. Now, over the last 100 days, the much larger Long Valley caldera has been acting up. It's acting up with uplift, with earthquakes, and it's doing what geologists and the U.S. Geological Survey are calling concern. The caldera, the mouth of the volcano, is moving. According to scientific instruments monitoring the area, the United States Geological Survey, that's the USGS, in the area in the vicinity of the Long Valley caldera, find that it is deforming and it's moving rapidly compared to previous records. Now, how sure are they this is happening? They're 95% confident, and the data assembled is significant. It shows that a recent time span, the amount of the movement is causing statistically significant strain in the rocks of the area. It is not a conspiracy theory or conjecture or amateur geological antics. This is from the USGS itself. This is the actual data. And now if you can see it in the article I'll leave below for you. It may look like gobbledygook to you, but you're not alone. You can scroll down and understand the explanations. USGS instrument measurements. It says the following exceed SRN 1.5, and at the 95% CI, the assemble is significant. Time span is 31 out of 730 days. To be significant at the 95% CI, counts need to exceed 20 units in either mm per year or nanostrain per year. So you can be saved the trouble. All of the readings in the first data exceed the 20 units. The following units exceed SNR 2.0, and at the 95% CI, the assemble is significant. This time span is 31 out of 730 days. To be significant at the 95% CI level, counts need to be 9 units in either mm per year or nanostrain per year. And now again, they save us the trouble. All the data in the second set exceeds 9 units. One is read by a lot. And the following exceed SRN 3.0 at the 95% CI, assemble significant. Time span is 31 out of 730 days. Significantly at the 95% CI level, counts need to exceed 1 unit in either mm per year or nanostrain per year. And again, they save us the trouble. They all exceed 1 unit. The ones in red by a lot. So what does this mean? So judging by the deformation directions and the rates, the magma plume is subsiding over the previous caldera and rising just south of it. This is where the earthquakes are swarming now. The entire thing is tilting away from the mountains, with the northern edge of the old caldera sinking, the southern edge moving north. It's as if pushed by some force in the swarm region, and this does not look at all good. This is what the USGS puts it as being. Increasing volcanic unrest, including earthquake swarms, ground deformation, and carbon dioxide gas emissions in the Long Valley area since 1980, increases the chance of an eruption occurring in the near future. Scientists still lack adequate data to reliably calculate by how much. Volcanic unrest in some other large volcanic system has persisted for decades or even centuries without leading to the eruption. But since volcanic unrest can escalate to an eruption quickly in a few weeks or days or less, the USGS scientists are monitoring the activity closely. And for those of you who might not quite comprehend this, they're putting it very clearly in another way. Out of nowhere, the mountain started moving several times faster than it's ever moved before, in a direction it is not supposed to be moving, while shaking like a leaf and belching poisonous gas. So that should be clear enough for just anyone. The USGS has also issued a status statement about the volcano which reads as follows. Long Valley Caldera, California, Mono County, latitude 37.7 north, longitude 118.87 degrees west, elevation 2,600 meters or 8,530 feet, volcano type caldera, composition basalt to rhyolite, most recent eruption 16 to 17,000 years ago, nearby towns Mammoth Lakes, threat potential very high. Oh joy, threat potential is very high, just what we need. Earthquakes, there are huge swarms of earthquakes, there's a whole list here. So the ground is deforming, carbon monoxide and earthquakes. We all know earthquakes are the pretty reliable indicator of a pending eruption. How many earthquakes have there been and how big were they? Well, there's been 284 earthquakes in the last 5 days. And the report says, notice the depth column that very many of the earthquakes are happening at a negative depth. That means above ground. How does that happen? The volcano itself that rises 8,550 feet above ground, and some of the earthquakes are higher than ground level. That means that it's happening in the volcano itself. The above ground in the volcano quakes are highlighted in either yellow, less than 2 kilometers above ground, or in red, more than 2 kilometers above ground. What causes earthquakes inside a volcano higher than the ground level? Well, that's lava moving upwards. So that's bad. That's bad. A negative depth above ground. Lava moving upwards. That means that it's about to erupt. There's a whole list of earthquakes here. I mean, most of the article is all this, if you care to see them one by one. Now, do you have your attention on this? That's good, because we're told exactly what an eruption of the long lava caldera could mean. According to the USGS, the volcano last erupted, as we said, 16 to 17,000 years ago. Before that, they know it also erupted 760,000 years ago, because they tracked the volcanic ash deposits and found they covered an area shown in green on the map. Of course, the USGS could be correct. Perhaps all this activity and earthquakes and ground deformation at a rate they've never seen before, the whole mountain moving in a direction it's not supposed to be moving and belching toxic gas, might mean nothing. But then again, it could be what Mount St. Helens was about to happen when it blew just before it blew. We just figured the good folks of California, Nevada, and other nearby states might want to know what the facts are and decide for themselves if all this speculatory, unusual stuff means nothing. So if there is actually a big eruption coming, those big flows of gray-colored ash that careen down the mountain, called pyroclastic flows, move at about 500 miles an hour. If you see movies, you see the people running, trying to run it out, trying to get out faster than the pyroclastic flow, and some of them do make it with the car. That's not true. That does not happen, because it moves at 500 miles an hour. That's almost as fast as an airplane. And the temperature of those gray, billowy clouds of ash, that's 800 degrees. So you can count outrunning it. You will not survive it. It'll because the speed of the ash cloud knocks down everything in its path, and the temperature of the ash cloud causes everything to burst into flames. Now, for those in the green-colored area, you should be aware that volcanic ash is not actually ash. It is pulverized rock. It will stall your car by clogging the air intake, and if you get out of your car to see why it stalled and you breathe in a few whiffs of ash, it turns into mud-like sludge in your lungs, and it turns into cement in a couple of good whiffs, and you're suffocating on the sludge. There is no treatment, nor cure, you're just dead. So there are more quakes, and they're getting stronger. In the hours spent researching and writing this article, USGS has begun reporting even more earthquakes, and they're getting stronger. Now, a brief history, we said approximately 760,000 years ago, the volcanic eruption took place in the northern portions of present-day California, which was 2,000 times greater than the more recent eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. 2,000 times greater. The eruption caused a caldera 10 miles wide and 20 miles in length. It's estimated that the eruption left a lava flow that covered 1,500 square miles and was caused the placement of 150 cubic miles of volcanic material. The ash from the volcano was thrown as far east as Nebraska and Kansas, all the way to the Pacific Ocean in the west, into Idaho, Wyoming in the north, and even northern parts of Mexico. In the modern day world, the volcano in question has not had any volcanic activity over 200 years. Well, this is an old article I'm reading from. This is from 2007. Well, we just read to you what happens. It is active, and it's pushing and belching and rising, and we have the negative earthquakes, which means that the lava is flowing through the volcano. In 1980, volcano watch was set at an all-time high after Mount St. Helens eruption, which took the lives of many bystanders caught in the path of the violent explosion. Which such a disaster freshened the minds of American people, the USGS began searching for other volcanoes in the continental United States that might also present a danger. We also have Yellowstone ready to burst. Now, the ways of the caldera in Long Valley caldera is being constantly monitored by USGS, remote sensors, seismicity, ground deformation, low-lying atmospheric gases, hydrology, that is